Ocean of Storms by Brief and Dreamy. Chapter 8. With legs outstretched and one arm hooked over the back of his chair, Malfoy didn't quite sneer, but his lip curled enough to give the same impression. Ron's clenched fists and tense shoulders provided an amusing contrast. He glared at the chessboard with enough intensity that Harry wondered if it would burst into flames. Given that Ron had engaged the anti-cheating charm after their third game, Malfoy now resorted to psychological warfare to give himself an edge. He affected disinterest, almost lethargy. The more contempt Malfoy demonstrated for the game, the more it irritated Ron. They were evenly matched, Ron and Malfoy, which meant the games happened often enough that Harry had considered throwing the set into the fireplace just to get a bit more of Malfoy's attention. No, it was good. If they weren't actually getting along any better, at least they'd been channeling their aggression through rooks and bishops rather than fists. Malfoy held a hand to his face as he yawned. Ron's jaw twitched and his ears went pink. Behind them, the lake shivered jungle green through the windows as rain pelted its surface. The Gryffindors had discussed taking advantage of the Saturday to cobble together a casual Quidditch match, but the weather had put paid to that. Instead, they'd settled inside. Wool throws and a variety of house colors decorated the chairs and sofas. Astoria and Malcolm flitted about the room, offering steaming mugs of cocoa. Harry'd never have imagined the Slytherin common room could feel cozy, but the gathered crowd seemed to be enjoying the rainy day. In a chair near the fire, Hermione scribbled notes onto a roll of parchment long enough to trail onto the floor. Neville, his arm around Hannah, sat chatting with Anthony and Michael, while Hannah taught Lavender how to knit. A buzz of conversation enlivened the space. Luna pointed to the latest copy of the Quibbler, explaining something to a very bemused-looking Theo. In the corner, Seamus and Daphne were using their mouths for something other than talking. Harry still shivered inside the jumper Molly had given him, but watching Malfoy's indolent posh boy act warmed him up. He chewed at his thumbnail, stroking the cat curled up on his lap. He wanted to crawl over and drag Malfoy onto the floor. Malfoy's eyes slid to Harry and caught him staring. He smirked. "If your turn takes any longer, the pieces will have died of old age, Weasley," he said, using his wand to conjure a quill and a piece of parchment. A moment later, one of Malfoy's cranes flapped its way over. Harry plucked it out of the air. "Don't think I don't know what you're up to, Potter," read the note. "Your brooding leers aren't going to put me off. I'll have Weasley in tears before this game is finished." Harry snorted. Brooding leers. Had he been leering brutally? He'd have to watch that. He conjured his own quill and responded. "Didn't realize you were so easily distracted. If I was trying to get you flustered, I'd just tell you." He wrote a few lines describing what he'd like to do to Malfoy once they were alone together and sent his message along. Malfoy's cheeks flamed as he read it. He adjusted his position, glaring at Harry. Harry grinned. Despite Malfoy's previous offer, they hadn't yet done what Harry described in his note. He'd thought about it over the past week. Rather a lot, if he were honest. But given what they were already doing was so brilliantly satisfying, he hadn't felt rushed. Maybe tonight, though. Or that afternoon. Imagining what it would be like, how it would feel like to slide inside Malfoy, Harry went hot all over. Still red-faced, Malfoy moved one of his pieces. Ron snickered. He moved a knight, then said, "Checkmate." Scowling, Malfoy crossed his arms. The stone door slid open. A figure entered and peered around the room. A tall, handsome man wearing an Auror uniform. Harry shot up. He started walking, then sped to a trot. Meyer spotted him and smiled. Harry ran the last few feet. He hesitated, almost swaying, unsure if a hug was appropriate. Meyer held out his hand, so Harry grabbed it and shook, beaming. "You're better? You're okay?" "I'm completely healed," said Meyer. He looked well. "Strong and healthy. I wanted to tell you personally, as I understand you were worried." "Yeah, thanks," said Harry. "I'm glad you did. Did you hear about Theo?" He tried not to bounce. "We haven't caught Dolohov yet. He imperioused an Acromantula to capture me. Are the Aurors going after him? Do you have a plan?" Meyer gave him a fond look that made Harry warm and a bit jittery. "There'll be time for us to talk, but now I must report back to Auror Jimenez. I just wanted you to know that I am healed. When can we start our patrols again?" "The Aurors are going to do a thorough sweep of the forest. We've brought in extra forces from Europe. Dolohov will not be able to hide much longer." He clapped Harry on the shoulder and turned to leave. An idea occurred to Harry. It made his pulse speed up. "Wait," he said. I want to give you something." Meyer gave him a quizzical look. "Okay." Heart beating hard, Harry ran to the dorm room and pulled open his trunk. They were at the bottom, wrapped in one of his old school robes. He pulled the parcel out. His hand shook as he unfolded the cloth and took out the mirrors. One whole, one just a shard. Looking at them, he thought it might be a terrible idea. Meyer would think it was presumptuous, crossing the line between mentor and mentee. He took a deep breath, trying to calm down, not understanding why he felt so panicky. He was going to do it anyway. He felt as if he had to. He ran back to the common room. "It's so if you're ever in trouble, you can contact someone." He gave Meyer the intact mirror. "Well, me. You can contact me, and I can get McGonagall or anyone else." He shifted from one leg to the other. "This is a very thoughtful gift," said Meyer. His brow creased. "But you know, it is not necessary. The Aurors have methods of communication." "Just take it," said Harry. "Please." The searching look Meyer gave him made Harry feel about 12. With a nod, Meyer pocketed the mirror. "Thank you, Harry." Harry smiled, wondering why his eyes were stinging, and Meyer left. The thread of pleasure and longing that Harry always felt in his presence followed him out of the room. He hugged himself and trudged back over to the sofa, where Malfoy was now sitting. "Merlin," said Lavender. She fanned herself with her hand. "Tell me about it," said Parvati. Malcolm held his hand against his forehead as if he felt faint. "I need a cooling charm." "What?" said Harry. "What?" echoed Ron. "Oh, come on." Malcolm threw himself back against his chair. "He's like a giant Auror Prince Charming handsomeness lolly." "If you like blocks of wood," said Malfoy, who, Harry now noticed, was sitting rigid, wearing a pinched expression. "You're mad," said Malcolm. "That man is objectively beautiful. It's not a question of personal taste." Harry paused. Malfoy rolled his wand between his fingers, looking like he wanted to curse someone. Harry had a pretty good idea who and why, but he was too full of other confusing emotions to do anything about it. He ran his fingers through his hair and slunk off to the solitude of his dorm. Once there, he shut himself up behind his bed curtains. Meyer, alive and healthy. It had been Harry's fault he'd been wounded, but now he was better. No permanent harm done. Harry hugged his knees to his chest. And now he had the mirror, so Harry didn't have to worry. And they'd brought in more Aurors. Meyer would be all right. He wouldn't get hurt again. He wouldn't... Harry squeezed his eyes shut and tried to pull himself together. It was strange to feel so much about someone whose first name he still didn't know. The rap of someone knocking on a bedpost interrupted his thoughts. "Harry?" "Hermione." He frowned. "I'm going to come in," she said, and pulled back the curtain. "No, wait, Harry began. She climbed in anyway. Harry huffed and stared aggressively at his knees. "That was a sweet gesture," said Hermione, giving him Sirius's mirror. "No offense, but I came in here to be alone." He picked at the thread in the worn patch on his jeans. "You can talk to us when you're upset, Harry. Ron and me, both or either. You think you're burdening us, but you're not. We're here for you." "Great," said Harry, trying to modulate the irritation in his voice. "And maybe if you did talk to us, you'd start to feel better about things." "Hermione!" He huffed and gave in. "What do you want to talk about?" She gave him a careful look. "He reminds you of Sirius, doesn't he?" Harry stiffened, annoyance flaming into raw anger. He took a moment, then said, "Meyer's nothing like Sirius." "I know." She put her hand on his knee. He ignored it. "I meant your relationship with him." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you? You lost Sirius. You lost Dumbledore, even Lupin. It's only natural that you're scared of losing Meyer, too." He pressed his palms against his eyes, fighting the tar-like grief bubbling to the surface. "Hermione!" "Fine," she said. "I'll leave you alone. Just think about what I said." Keeping his face covered, Harry lay down. When Hermione squeezed his shoulder, he put his hand over hers. Even after she left, her suggestion spread through his thoughts and stuck. He couldn't get rid of it. He remembered how in fourth year, when he'd longed for someone to advise him, someone like a parent, he'd turned to Sirius. He didn't see Meyer as a parent, and Harry didn't ache for him the way he ached for Sirius. 15 and helpless, watching Sirius prowl miserably through Grimmauld Place, terrified he'd do something reckless. Harry pressed his face hard into his pillow, folding it over his ears, making everything dark and quiet. Meyer wasn't like that. He was light, confident, seemingly happy, but also putting himself in danger because of Harry, because someone was after him, and Harry so desperately wanted Meyer to see him, to like him, to respect him. He hated that Hermione was probably right, as usual. Once he'd gained control of himself, Harry went to find Malfoy and pull him out of his strop. He wasn't in the common room, nor in his dorm. Harry climbed all the way to the 6th floor to check the bathroom, but found it empty too. Well, almost empty. "Oh, it's you," said Myrtle, floating out of a cubicle. She sniffed. "Don't pay me any mind. I'm only a ghost after all. It's not like my feelings matter." "Myrtle," said Harry, "have you seen Malfoy? Has he been here?" "Don't make me laugh. Draco hasn't visited me since—" Her eyes widened. "Well, since you tried to murder him. Do you remember, Harry? Water spraying, blood everywhere." She beamed, as if recalling something pleasant. "It was horrible." "Yeah," said Harry, glaring. "I remember. It really is a shame he survived. I'd have loved to share my toilet with him." She crossed her arms. "Well, there's no reason to look at me like that. I'm not the one who cut him open. How come you're only showing up now? We've been working here for months. You haven't been spying on us, have you?" "Why? Were you doing something suspicious?" Harry didn't answer. "To tell you the truth," said Myrtle, "I've been avoiding the castle altogether most of the time. It's just not the same since they arrived." "Who do you mean?" Harry asked, although he suspected he knew. "Them! The newcomers! They've only been ghosts for a little while, and they think they know everything there is to know about it." She frowned. "Well, some of us have been here for years, and some of us don't think we're too good for haunting." She sunk down into the floor and settled on a silvery heap. "I tried to be nice, to be helpful. I said one of them could share my toilet, but not one. Not one." She started to howl and sob so loudly that Harry covered his ears. "Not a single one of them's even bothered to come and visit, because a moldy old dungeon is better than spending time with Myrtle." Cringing, Harry wondered if it would be wrong to leave. She seemed pretty occupied with weeping. He took a step towards the door. "Fine," she wailed. "You leave too. Just leave me here, all alone, forever." Damn it. Harry remembered. "Colin told me you showed him how to swim in the lake." "Oh, Colin!" Her crying abruptly ceased, and she smiled, looking dreamy. "I do like Colin. He's different than the others. He's friendly. He says they're trying to—" Her face creased, as if talking about something repulsive. "Move on. But I'm going to convince him to stay with me. It won't take that much longer. The more time they spend here, the harder it will be for them to go." "How do you know that?" Harry asked with a sense of horror. "I just do. You can see it. The castle is starting to claim them." "Do you know how much time is left? Before it's too late?" Myrtle shrugged. "Ask the grumpy professor. He thinks he knows everything." And with that, she shot up into the air, then dived down a toilet. He needed to tell Hermione. The potion was almost ready, but their time was limited. She needed to know. First, he needed to find Malfoy. Panicked that he might have left Hogwarts like he'd been planning to previously, Harry strode down the corridor, thinking he'd try the Quidditch pitch despite the rain. As he passed the trophy room, the sound of clattering metal pulled him short. A familiar cut-glass accent let loose a string of curse words. Harry grinned. Repairs hadn't yet begun in the trophy room. Shattered crystal crunched beneath Harry's feet as he crept through splintered cabinets. Rain-dampened sunlight flooded through the window, making the glass shards sparkle and the silver and gold of the trophies gleam. He found Malfoy in the corner, lifting a huge, ancient-looking silver cup from the floor. When Malfoy spotted him, there was a split second in which his eyes lit up. Then he lifted his chin and sneered, "Piss off, Potter. I'm sick of the sight of your face." He twirled his wand, and a snake of puffy smoke wound around the trophy, polishing it and making it shine even brighter. Septimus Malfoy, it read. Harry caught the year, 1752, but couldn't read what Septimus had done to earn it. He probably didn't want to know. "Doing a bit of menial work?" he asked. "Did you hit your head?" "You can't depend on servants for this sort of thing," said Malfoy. "Besides, no one, elf or not, has been in here since the battle. The place is in ruins. I won't see my family history fall into neglect." "Merlin forbid," said Harry, and Malfoy shot him a filthy look. "How long is it going to take for you to stop pouting?" "It's perfectly reasonable," said Malfoy, jaw clenched, "to be cross when your boyfriend runs across the room and throws himself into the arms of another man." Harry twitched. "That's not even remotely what happened." "Why do you twitch whenever I say boyfriend?" Malfoy's spell rubbed furiously at the cup. "I don't know." Harry had a sense of things speeding along faster than he could control. "Boyfriend." He suppressed another twitch. "It's not how I think of," he might as well just say it, "of us." "Right," said Malfoy. The strength of his spell became so vigorous, Harry thought he was going to rub the name right off. "So you're just fucking me." Harry shifted on his feet, the corner of his mouth turned up. "Not yet." Malfoy stopped polishing. His mouth tensed in a way that told Harry he was trying not to smile. And he blushed. Draco Bloody Malfoy, polishing the Malfoy family trophies, which went back centuries. How could they be in us? Sunlight gilded Malfoy's hair, making it gleam as bright as the metal. His perfect aristocratic posture. The pout to his lip that belied his attempt to hide what he was feeling. The slight tremor of his hands. Harry wanted him so badly. He stepped closer. "I don't know what we are," he said. "Do you?" "Aside from a disaster waiting to happen." Malfoy slid the trophy onto an unbroken shelf. Harry moved even nearer. Malfoy lowered his head, but didn't slide away. "I don't think of us as boyfriends," Harry said. "That word. It's mundane. Boring." He wound a handful of the fabric of Malfoy's shirt into his hand and tugged him closer. "Tame." Rough-voiced, Malfoy said, "Tame is definitely not a word that applies to us." He put a hand against Harry's chest. Harry leant closer to his ear and said, "We're wild." He made an attempt to imitate Malfoy's accent. "Completely uncivilized." "That's certainly true on your part." "Nothing's going on between me and Meyer," said Harry. "I don't think of him like that." "So you say, but..." He took a deep breath and looked away again. "You lit up like a Lumos charm when he walked in the room." The heat of Malfoy's body was getting to Harry. He wanted to smooth out Malfoy's spike so he could do something about it. "I like him. I was worried about him. I was glad that he was all right." Malfoy shrugged, his posture starting to soften. Amazed that they were talking like this, that Malfoy had admitted he was jealous, Harry pulled him closer. Every beat of his heart spread warmth through his limbs. He buried his face against Malfoy's neck. "You're every bit as good-looking as he is," he said, nibbling at Malfoy's ear. Malfoy gave in and leaned into him. "Every bit as..." "Better-looking." He searched for the right word. He'd never considered whether or not Malfoy was objectively attractive. His looks had been obscured by too many layers of horrid git when they'd been at school. But now, high, sharp cheekbones, his nose sloping to an elegant point, eyes that spoke of his mood despite his best efforts. Harry liked the way Malfoy looked. He enjoyed looking at him. To him, Malfoy was lovely. "You're fit," he said, because he wasn't going to say that. "Fit," Malfoy snorted. "You're ugly as a toad, just so you know. I've only been messing with you out of pity." Harry slid his hand under Malfoy's shirt, soft gray linen, and pressed it against his stomach. The muscles shifted. Harry trailed his thumb through the soft line of hair. Malfoy's breath hitched. "Don't think you can..." He arched a bit. "Don't think you can just..." "Can't I?" said Harry, his lips against Malfoy's neck. Malfoy smelled sweet and clean. Harry wanted to get him sweaty so he'd smell more like himself again. "You're trying to distract me." He slipped the tips of his fingers below the waistband of Malfoy's trousers. "Is it working?" He drew his teeth along the smooth skin behind Malfoy's ear. Malfoy sighed. Harry slid his hand deeper, beneath Malfoy's pants. His fingertips slipped over the hot, slick head of his cock. Malfoy exhaled sharply, then grabbed the back of Harry's neck and held it tight. "Listen, Potter," he said. "Whatever words you use to describe what we're doing, if we're doing it, you're mine. I don't share. Do you understand?" "Oh," said Harry, breathless. "Sure." The sharpness of Malfoy's voice, the greed and command in it, made his knees wobbly. Malfoy yanked Harry closer and spoke into his ear. "Say it. Say you're mine." Going completely liquid, Harry could only whisper, "I'm yours." He gasped to catch his breath. "All yours." With Malfoy's voice sliding through his ears like warm mercury, he felt like he'd pledge loyalty to Voldemort's cadaver if Malfoy ordered him to. He burned with shame that only made him more randy. Malfoy gripped Harry's arm and forced his hand further down his pants. Harry slid his fingers around Malfoy's balls. They quivered against his palm, tenderly warm and fuzzy. Malfoy made a sound and shuddered. Harry stroked his thumb up the base of Malfoy's shaft. "Stop playing and get me off," Malfoy snapped. "Bossy git." Taking his time, Harry undid Malfoy's fly and pulled his cock free. It still shocked him that he was allowed to do this. He gave it a slow tug. Malfoy hissed, watching Harry's hand. His fingers dug into the nape of Harry's neck. There was barely enough space between them for Harry to move, but he managed an unhurried stroke. "Potter," Malfoy whined. Harry grinned, but started winking him in earnest. He loved how hard Malfoy felt beneath the skin moving silkily against his fingers. Watching Harry through half-closed eyes, Malfoy panted, tiny, helpless sighs escaping from the back of his throat. It made Harry ache. They fell into soft kisses, which grew wild and fervent. Their feet scuffled over the carpet of broken glass until Malfoy fell against a cabinet. The frame juddered with their movements. Malfoy bit his lip, quivering with tension. Harry sped up, riveted by Malfoy's face. Malfoy gasped, and Harry did too, helplessly. He pressed his own rigid cock against his hand as he moved it. Malfoy's breath stuttered, and Harry knew he was going to come. He shoved his free fingers into Malfoy's hair and whispered to him, "I'm yours." With his face creased as if he were in pain, Malfoy came, hot and messy, over Harry's fist. Harry brushed their lips together, not quite kissing him, while Malfoy cried out as another pulse dampened the front of Harry's t-shirt. "You're so," Harry said, words just tumbling out. I really," he clung, waiting for Malfoy to come down. Still catching his breath, Malfoy rubbed a circle over the knob of Harry's spine with his thumb. His hair stuck damp to his cheeks. "You what?" Not wanting to finish saying what had been on the tip of his tongue, Harry instead said, "I really need you to touch me." With a smirk, Malfoy reached for the front of Harry's jeans, then wrinkled his nose when he found them messy. "Not my fault," said Harry. "I think you'll find it was," Malfoy responded and undid Harry's fly. With his forehead resting atop Harry's shoulder, Malfoy lazily winked Harry off. The perspiration on his scalp made his hair smell musky and delicious. Harry'd already been halfway to coming just from watching Malfoy. He tried to hold on, but Malfoy's hand was ecstasy, and he wasn't going to be able to. Malfoy swiveled his head and bit at Harry's neck, hard and possessive. His hand sped up, and Harry arched, moaning, lost in how good it felt as it worked him. He lifted his hips, holding his breath, and then came, pleasure twisting through his body like fire and sugar, sweet and hot and perfect. Malfoy swept his hand over the floor, vanishing the crystal shards, and Harry cast some cushioning charms in the corner. They sat shoulder to shoulder, leaning back against the wall. Harry needed a bit more time with Malfoy, just a little bit more, and as Malfoy hadn't run off yet, he might feel the same. He'd started talking now, giving a sort of lecture about Septimus Malfoy and his school days' exploits. Adrenaline still frosted Harry's limbs, cool and lovely, and his mind hadn't quite focused. He enjoyed the sound of Malfoy's voice while paying minimal attention to the words. The trophy, apparently, had been earned for excellence in care of magical creatures. Septimus had bred a new strain of hippogriffs, which Harry found ironic, but didn't say so. After several minutes, he got antsy. "You aren't the only one with an illustrious family line," he said, then imitated Malfoy's drawl. "I'm descended from the Peverills, you know." Malfoy raised a doubtful eyebrow. "Really?" "It's true. It's why I have the invisibility cloak." "Plenty of people have invisibility cloaks, those who can afford them at least." "No, I mean the cloak." Malfoy made a disbelieving face. After a moment, he turned towards Harry. "Why do you say the invisibility cloak?" "You know," said Harry, wishing he hadn't brought it up. "The one from the story, the three brothers. The oldest got the wand, the middle brother got the stone." Harry swallowed. "And the youngest got the cloak, to hide from death." Malfoy gazed at him silently. A bit embarrassed, Harry shrugged. "It's just a story," said Malfoy. "Well, yeah, probably. But my cloak is from Ignatus Peverell. Whether it's really part of Death's cloak, I don't—" "And does it work?" Malfoy asked. "Does it hide you from death?" "Does it hide you from death?" As he tried to figure out how to answer the question, Harry's mind went back to trudging through the forest beneath the cloak, to arriving at the clearing, to revealing himself to Voldemort, to that blinding flash of green light. "Potter," said Malfoy, "are you—" Harry faked a smile. "Depends on whether you believe the story or not." He felt shaky inside. "It hides you from anyone who wants to kill you. Except for Mad-Eye Moody, he could see through it." "That crazy bastard," said Malfoy, scowling. "He never should have been allowed—" "Hey!" Harry opened his mouth to argue, but then realized. "Wait, how do you not know?" "I know he should have been locked up in that Janus Thicky ward instead of teaching at a school. Father said—" He trailed off, frowning. Harry scratched his head. It hadn't been in the Prophet, of course, because Fudge had buried the whole topic. And the other Death Eaters wouldn't have found out unless Voldemort told them. Maybe Lucius knew but never told Draco? It didn't matter. He explained about Barty Crouch Jr. and Malfoy's eyes widened. Harry stopped short when it was time to talk about the graveyard. Malfoy's father had been there, and Malfoy had mocked Harry about it afterwards. Harry looked into Malfoy's eyes, searching for that boy. The boy who'd refused to stand when Dumbledore toasted Cedric, who'd taunted Harry about choosing the losing side. Malfoy blinked at him, looking disconcerted. Harry thought about everything Malfoy had been through since then, what he'd learned about death and violence. He'd changed. Harry was sure of it. The things Harry had been through had changed him, and the same was true of Malfoy. It had to be. "Is that," Malfoy said, "is that the cloak? Is that—" He huffed, as if impatient with himself. "The Dark Lord thought you were dead. He announced it. Harry Potter is dead. Was it the cloak that fooled him?" Harry hesitated. He'd been asked that before, and it always made him want to evaporate. He'd told Ron and Hermione, of course. They knew every detail, but they were virtually a part of him. The idea of sharing something so personal with anyone else felt wrong. And yet, he wanted to tell Malfoy, too. The realization washed over him, making his skin prickle. Malfoy had told him about watching Dolohov kill that family. Harry wanted Malfoy to know what he had lived through. Maybe Hermione was right, and he did have an urge to self-destruction, but he didn't care. He'd become greedy. He wanted Malfoy closer. He wanted to weave their energy together, to make it a part of himself. He decided to do it, to give him his deepest secret, the thing almost no one but Ron and Hermione knew. The ache he felt as he pried open the memory felt like a cage of bone cracking. The secret pulsed as he lifted it free. Harry licked his lips, heart speeding up. He didn't know how to start. Simply blurting out, "Hey, let me tell you about the time I died," seemed inelegant. "What are you about to say?" asked Malfoy, looking frightened. "Don't." "Did you know—" said Harry. "Don't say it," Malfoy whispered, utterly still, making no attempt not to listen. Your mother never told you about what happened in the forest? Malfoy shook his head. She saved my life, Harry continued. For you. I told her that you were still alive, and she lied to Voldemort, telling him I was dead when I wasn't. He waited, judging Malfoy's reaction. I had to go to him. It had to be me. Malfoy's eyes shot up. He smirked. You honestly thought you were the only one who could defeat the Dark Lord? Salazar Potter, that's... I was, said Harry. His hands curled into fists. He took a long, slow breath. I was, he repeated in a calmer voice. We were connected. When I was a baby and he tried to kill me then, I ended up with a bit of his soul lodged in my head. Malfoy didn't look amused anymore. I'd thought it was because of the prophecy, Harry continued. Neither can live while the other survives. But it was more than that. Dumbledore knew, well, he guessed, but he turned out to be right, that you were a Horcrux, Malfoy whispered. Harry leant back and rubbed his face. Kind of. He didn't mean to make me one, but I was. And sometimes I could feel what he was feeling, see what he saw. He tried to ignore the horror on Malfoy's face. I saw you once. He forced you to use the Cruciatus curse on Rao. Malfoy curled away. You saw that? Harry nodded. He put his hand on Malfoy's knee. You looked so scared and sick. I could tell it made you feel sick. Malfoy's eyes started back and forth. He would have... I know. Harry tightened his grip on Malfoy's knee. I know he forced you to do it. Malfoy looked so shaken. Harry worried he'd flee. He scooted closer. He took Malfoy's hand and wound their fingers together. Malfoy's eyes settled on Harry's forehead. Is it still there? No. Harry shook his head for emphasis. No, it's gone. Dead. When he hit me with the killing curse. The killing curse? He used the killing curse on you and you survived? Again? Are you immortal? Are you even Harry put his hand over Malfoy's mouth, fighting to stay calm. Please. Malfoy nodded, and Harry lowered his hand. He spoke quickly, wanting it over now. My mother used old magic to save me when I was a baby. She gave her life for mine. And Voldemort used my blood in the graveyard to get his body back. So when he cursed me in the forest, her protection saved me again. I'm not immortal. Afterwards, when I was lying on the ground, he asked your mother, is he dead? She asked if you were still alive. I nodded. She told him I'd been killed. Malfoy knocked his head back against the wall. Harry took in his pale, startled face. There was something about his expression that made him uneasy. Cold prickling the back of his neck, he picked at the hole in his jeans, letting Malfoy grapple with what he'd heard. He didn't regret telling him. Not yet. Malfoy hadn't laughed or been scornful or made fun of him. It would probably be okay. The broken cabinets blocked the light in uneven patterns, creating mad shadows across the wooden floor. Harry tried not to think of gravestones. Potter, said Malfoy, eyes closed. Did you know, when you went to him, that you'd survive? No. He kept his eyes on his knees. Snape's memory only told me I had to go, not... Snape's memory? Malfoy gave Harry such a helplessly confused look that Harry bit his lip so he wouldn't smile. That's a whole other thing, and it involved details too personal to Snape to pass on. You should ask him about it if you want to know. Malfoy stared. Shit. Oh, said Harry. I mean his portrait. Right. Frowning, Malfoy said, regardless, you're telling me that you went to the Dark Lord thinking you'd just stand there and let him kill you. Pretty much. Malfoy hunched over his knees and hugged them. He shook his head. What are you? Maybe this was it. Maybe now Malfoy would use what Harry had said against him. A pressure developed behind his eyes. I don't know what you mean. You gave yourself up. You willingly walked to your death. He would have killed loads more people if I hadn't. You were there. You heard him. Malfoy went quiet. He didn't move, except to blink now and then. He'd retreated back into himself, which was the opposite of what Harry had wanted. Panic fizzled in his stomach. Maybe this had been a mistake. He wished he could take it back, or knew how to cast Obliviate. In a chillingly calm voice, Malfoy asked, "Why did you come back for me? Why didn't you let me burn?" Blindsided, Harry said, "You reckon I think anyone I don't like deserves to die? It goes beyond dislike. Wint." Malfoy didn't respond. Harry shoved his shoulder harder than he'd intended to. Malfoy's brows creased in irritation. "Wint," Harry repeated, raising his voice. "You didn't deserve to die. I never wanted that. I know I said some stupid things when I was angry, but you were just a kid. I was a Death Eater." He raised his head at Harry's reaction. "I was, Potter. I took the mark. He didn't force it on me. I was proud. He'd chosen me. I was going to prove myself to him, that I could be useful, that I was devoted. I tried to kill Dumbledore. I would have done if your plans were idiotic." Malfoy's eyes flashed. They were," said Harry, "because you didn't really want to do it, and you couldn't in the end. You had him cornered at wand point, weak and disarmed." Red spots bloomed across Malfoy's cheekbones. He opened his mouth but didn't speak. "The cloak," said Harry. "Remember? I was there. Dumbledore pinned me to the wall and hid me, but I saw everything. You had him at your mercy, and all you did was talk." Malfoy turned sharply away. "That's what it was. Talk. You thought if you talked Death Eater enough, you'd finally become one. But once you saw what they were really about, you didn't want to be a part of it. It made you sick, because that's not who you are." "You're just saying that," said Malfoy. "I went back for you because I knew you were worth saving, and that was before I even really knew you. I know you now. I know who you really are, and I don't dislike you anymore, Malfoy. In fact, Malfoy's mouth hit Harry so hard, it took him a second to realize he was being kissed instead of punched. With smarting lips, Harry grabbed his shoulders. Malfoy's hand made a fist in Harry's hair and twisted. Shock and other emotions wiped Harry's mind clean. He held on, letting Malfoy maul his mouth, kissing back when he could. "You're the one who talks too much," Malfoy said, and pressed their foreheads together. "Okay," said Harry. "Okay, I'll stop." Harry smiled. He considered saying a few more things, but decided to quit while he was ahead. Malfoy drew away. "I still hate you, of course," he drawled. "Stupid, specky Potter." Laughing, Harry brushed his thumb over Malfoy's cheek, just to touch him. Malfoy shook his head, then rubbed at his eyes. He cleared his throat. "So you're saying that if it weren't for my mother, it would have all been over? He'd have won?" "Yeah," said Harry. "One day I'll tell you a story about wands and their loyalties. I think you'll enjoy it." He pulled Malfoy close again and kissed him. Malfoy slid his hands into Harry's hair, gentle this time. They snogged long enough for heat to blossom. Harry pushed Malfoy to the floor and rolled on top of him. With a wicked smile, Malfoy wrapped his legs around Harry's hips. Harry gasped and slid his hand up Malfoy's chest beneath his shirt and kissed him some more. When Malfoy arched his hips, Harry thrust against him, wondering if it was going to happen now, if they were going to do it now. Malfoy wrenched himself away. "Potter," he said, "there's a ghost watching us. I think it's a Creevy." Harry rolled off Malfoy and sat up. Colin covered his mouth with his hands, giggling, the white of his face darkening to gray. "I'm sorry, Harry. I didn't mean to watch. But I saw you, and it was interesting, and I forgot that it was rude." His smile dropped away. "I never got to do that." Malfoy got up, strode toward Septimus's trophy, and fiddled with it. Harry tried to arrange himself in the least embarrassing position he could muster and ended up with his knees bent in front of his chest, which was not very comfortable under the circumstances. Face burning, he adjusted himself, then coughed. "Where have you been, Colin?" He shrugged. "It gets boring being stuck in that room. Everyone's so gloomy." "Shh!" Harry jerked his head towards Malfoy, who looked back with narrowed eyes. "Sorry. It's just that Hermione says she needs you. The potion's ready. And you should bring Ron." "What's this about?" asked Malfoy, glancing at Colin. "You know Hermione," said Harry with a stiff laugh. "She's always got something brewing." "You're ever so good at lying," said Malfoy. "Only you're actually shit at it. But fine, don't tell me. I've enough to—" He waved his hand in a circle and glanced at Colin again. "It's rude to stare," said Colin, crossing his arms. "I didn't know that you—" Malfoy sighed and closed his eyes. "Died," he finished. "Oh," said Colin. "Well, I didn't know that you and Harry were getting off together. I didn't even know you fancied each other. I didn't even know Harry fancied boys. And Myrtle says it's rude to mention—" "Right." Having calmed down a bit, Harry got to his feet. "Thanks for the message, Colin." Colin grinned, gave him a thumbs up, and swept away through the ceiling. "I'll see you later," he said to Malfoy. Malfoy nodded. Their eyes stayed locked. There was an openness to Malfoy's expression Harry'd never seen before, like light glowing through fabric. Malfoy smoothed back his hair, and Harry shoved his hands in his pockets. He smiled. Malfoy smiled back, a new spark in his eyes that made Harry giddy. Once again, he stopped himself from saying the words that formed in his mind. He gave Malfoy a wave and then went off to find Ron.